Welcome to another exciting episode of Humanity 8.0, a podcast where we talk about our post-truth present and our transhuman future, with the aim of sketching out the outlines of what awaits us in the years and the decades ahead of us. This podcast is brought to you by Rokos. Companies with limited IT budgets and personnel can now get the same cybersecurity protection as big enterprises. Rokos' Secure Access Service Edge, SASE solution, with zero trust, provides enterprise-grade comprehensive cybersecurity so that you can focus on your business. For more, please visit www.rokos.com. That's ROQOS.com. And now, here's your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid, founder and CEO of Witlingo.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's look at the closest thing to immortality in our sphere, which is, let's say, organizations or companies, right? They're not physical entities. They have legacy. They start at a certain point in time, they grow, and they may continue and prosper doing the right thing, or they will die and collapse and so forth, right?
Sure.
So I know it's imperfect, right? Because, okay, they're type of human beings who are mortal. But it's one can see how if one takes care of an organization, it could live for a long, long time, right? Like the U.S., like the United States of America. It's a country, it's an entity. It has lived for 200, I don't know, what is it, 50 years, something like that, right? And it has a history, and it started, and right now it has some kind of a virus that it's trying to get rid of. It's trying to survive. And so I'm just trying to sort of grasp the concept in a concrete way. I'm thinking maybe empires, states, organizations, or companies could be something that I can learn from, right?
Well, I think those are the outputs of a mortal world, which basically is not human centric. It's not. And so let's talk about the pyramids. Let's talk about let's talk about art. Let's talk about anything that we make to live because we don't. So then we put our virtue and our intelligence and our creativity into making these things live because we don't. So we're looking at potentially reordering that and putting our intelligence and our virtue and our creativity into us actually living. And then those monuments and entities don't have the same shadow. They don't cast the same shadow over us. Like we're what's important. In an immortal world, human beings are what's important. Like literally your human form is what's important. Because it's what's eternal. Like we value what's eternal, right? Because we're immortalists inside. So we diminish the human body because we perceive it as being disposable, as being temporal. But we're talking about changing that. And then, why would we have war? Why would we murder one another? Why would we abuse one another? One thing I brought up in our earlier conversation is we have it's not like we're in a great holding pattern here. We have a lot of suffering. We have a tremendous amount of human suffering in the world. Even you and I suffer, and we're privileged. But there's the level of suffering is tremendous, and the level of abuse is tremendous. And so we're talking about doing something that possibly alters that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would argue with you or about the transhumanist movement to the extent that the position that one would take, let's say, within that movement is, let's make the life of everybody better, right? So, for example, right, it annoys me to hear folks talk about, say, a technology that will enable us to take care of some disease that's first world disease and making a big deal out of it, which is fine. When you have children in Africa and some continent in Asia and all that dying at a horrendous way from diseases that are totally preventable with nets, with mosquito nets. Okay, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
that it feels like, and this is one of the criticisms of transhumanism, it feels like it's focusing on the life of the privileged and putting its resources there,
Yeah,
as opposed to, it's called low-hanging fruit because, and again, this is not saying
yeah,
anything, hopefully it will take, because it feels like the value of the brown, poor baby
yeah.
and his mom, is a fraction of the life of a white person in North America, right?
Right,
Saying it
right.
bluntly, right? How would you respond to that? Like, are we, should we put billions of dollars to just take care of humanity at the baseline level and get their number of years, so that they don't die and these are all unnatural deaths. We all agree they are tragic, right? And a
Yeah,
baby dying at 2 years old,
yeah.
it's the worst thing in the world, in my opinion. But go ahead. What are your thoughts on
Well, Jesus said the poor you'll always have with you. And we always have had the poor, and we've never taken care of our poor. And we've always had elites, and we've always had underprivileged people, and we've never taken care of them. So that's never happened in the history of humanity. And so if we think that that is going to come out of our current model, I just say, why do you think that? That is a totally unreasonable expectation. And so what I appreciate about transhumanism is it looks at changing the model. And
that?
so I'd say that's what kind of given some arguments about why changing the model could lead to a a better distribution and a true experiencing of abundance
Okay,
for people.
makes sense. Makes sense.
The Romans didn't do it. The British didn't do it. The Americans haven't done it. Nobody's done it, and no one's going to do it under the current conditions. That's my
Mhm.
that's my view.
Yeah, no, that's no, I get that definitely. And that's a powerful point, which is, um, and although it is not proving anything, I think it's simply saying that, staying with the current model, right? Um, you're not gonna get there, even though you think you can, right?
Never.
Doesn't mean that your model is gonna get us there, but you're saying at least let's try it, or perhaps, or you feel like that, but maybe somebody might say, I don't know, but maybe he's right. We should try something radical and see what happens, because what we have now is unacceptable, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I became an immortalist in my 20s, and it wasn't because I was really concerned about my mortality, but what attracted me was this opportunity to work on something that could really change the paradigm or change the way things are, as opposed to just picking at leaves, which is, so even in my 20s I saw kind of, it just didn't feel real. And there's a lot of good organizations doing out there, and they're doing a lot of good work, but they're not changing this. They're not fundamentally changing the reality, and they're fighting the same fight that's been fought all along. And I felt like I needed that. I felt paralyzed. That's the truth. I felt paralyzed by by the status quo. And I felt like even as an artist, I felt like I had nothing to add. I had nothing to say that could make a difference. And I didn't just want to be part of it. For some reason, I didn't just want to just get my little moment of success and whatever, have a wife and kids or something like that, and just feel like that was it. Just it. I couldn't I couldn't get going, and I felt paralyzed by this condition, I guess, this social condition or the societal form that we have. And I couldn't believe in socialism. I couldn't believe like left-wing politics were going to change it. I certainly didn't believe right-wing politics were going to change it. And art wasn't going to change it. Religion wasn't going to change it. Education wasn't going to change it. So for me, it's exciting to feel like at least I'm working on something that can touch the foundation here.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I think I know your answer, but I just want you to flesh it out for us. I mean, one has to recognize, and maybe my opinion is wrong, that 100 years ago, the delta between 100 years ago and now, we have made progress in quantifiable ways.
Well, yeah.
Right. And then we can, I mean, both in terms of materially, and I think we have, well, I think we do have less racism, right, and so forth. I don't know. We see fascism emerging, but it just feels like perhaps there is progress. Is your argument that, yeah, sure, but compared to what we could have done, it's just not acceptable? Is that your stand, or is it? What would you say to that argument?
I mean, there's progress, right? There's all these people have been lifted out of poverty in China and India.
Yeah.
But it's still against the backdrop of immense human suffering, and that's what we're conditioned to accept. And so who knows where the politics is going to go? We had a pretty good election here. It could have been a lot worse. And, there's definitely trends towards fascism in this country. Putin's making war in
around
Europe.
The world. Yeah. There's a big push to fascism around the world.
So who knows? I mean, that could some of those gains could be lost. All of them could be lost. But something else is happening too, which is climate change. Yeah. So while we're dealing with our usual stuff of right and left, we need to be doing something totally different that we're not really getting to. So I think, one, we're in, some good things have happened. That's true, and that's good. It's in the context of a fundamental state of suffering that we call being human. Now, like the Russians talk about this very openly, Americans don't. I don't know how North Africans relate to it, but the Russians say you're born, you suffer, and you die, right? That's like the Russian, take on it.
Well, our take is not that, but go ahead.
but there's a truth to that. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know where I was going.
Yeah, no, you were answering my question.
Okay.
So let's say, let's talk about a young person who has a social conscience, right? And they want to do good.
Yeah.
And they want to help the poor, let's just say. Or let's say they want to help underprivileged children learn to read, which is hugely impactful, right? If you learn to read at 3 or 4, your life trajectory changes tremendously, right? So let's say it's 18-year-old kid who's coming out of high school, and she's going to college, and she wants to devote her energies into that, right?
Yeah.
As things stand, unfortunately, our lifespan is still short. So this person who wants to do the kind of a good, if you were to try to convince, how would you go about trying to convince her that be part of the transhumanist movement, because we're swinging for the fences.
Right.
We're going to do a paradigm change where these problems don't even come up. Right now they're coming up, and people have to go and sort of fill the holes as they come up, and so on. And your proposition, I think, we'll be in such a situation that there's a collective investment in ensuring that we have a sustainable planet, that we have peace and justice, because unrest, again, is very costly because we have a lot to lose, and so on. Anyway, let's say, how would you talk to her? Would you say, or maybe it's two things. You can definitely do things for the short term, but be part of the transhumanist movement, because that's also, yeah.
I mean, what's the long-term play here? I mean, so let's create abundance, but let's change the human condition. Some people are more global than others. For whatever reason, I was a global thinker. Being a global thinker can be very paralyzing, because you look at everything and you see everything, and you're not satisfied with just making sort of incremental gains within a small space. You want to change the state of play. So that's what it's about. I wouldn't say don't help anybody. I would say do what you want, but have a long game too, right? That's the difference, because people have been trying to help the poor forever, and good. Some people have and some suffering has been alleviated, but have a long game as well.
Okay, so let's stick with that young person. What concrete thing would she do to help the transhumanist movement? Would she like, what kind of things concretely? She would become an engineer, try to push the envelope, or she would join a movement and open a chapter. What exactly does it take for us to create that shift?
Well, there's people who create things. There are people who like are founder type people, and there's people who join and energize organizations. So one or the other, you know. If you see a gap and something that needs to be done in the context of transhumanism, and you want to do it, do it. But you don't have to do it. You can just join an organization that's doing great work, like the Coalition for Radical Life Extension. You can just support us. Really, we do a hell of a lot on not very much, you know. I mean, if we had the money that, you know, well, I don't want to, you know, there's a lot of money that goes into a lot of other things, which is fine. But yeah, just support an organization, get informed, get educated, talk to your friends, and have a vision. Catch a vision in your body. You know, you're a young person. Listen, you're going to be an old person. Okay. However young you are, being young is bullshit. You're going to be old. You're going to go down the same fucking road, as everybody else. And you might feel like it's so different now, but if you're a little bit awake, you know there's a plan for you, and it doesn't go anywhere new. So catch a vision in your body, catch a vision in your mind of not just repeating the cycle of basically your parents. It's everything like young people supposedly don't want, is to be their parents. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Actually not becoming your parents.
That's a good way of putting it.
You know,
I can see that on a bumper sticker for sure.
But otherwise, you're just going to go. Otherwise, you're just going to entertain yourself with ideas that you're doing something different, and you're just going to fall into the same patterns. You know.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
If let's say
that's the physics of adulthood. You know, there's forces that act on us, and there's forces that put us in certain positions, and we end up playing out something that is pretty conventional.
Okay. Well, I mean, there are people who are totally okay. Their great grandfather was a lawyer, and their grandfather was a lawyer, and their dad was a lawyer, and they're a lawyer, and they are the third or the fourth, and whatever.
Yeah.
And they're completely happy with it, and they conceptualize their life as being exactly what it ended up being, and they're happy with it. I mean, as far as you're concerned, sure, I have, live that way if you want, but you're saying that, I guess
be a transhumanist lawyer. So they're all lawyers. Be a transhumanist lawyer.
You know what? That's a good idea. Actually, that's a good way of seeing things, right? You can have your cake. You can have your cake and eat it too.
Just bend the tradition in a different direction.
In fact, you can work in such a way that the tradition will go on forever.
There you go. You like tradition? Hey, make it forever.
I think we're breaking some ground here. Okay, let me ask you one of the questions. Maybe let me ask you this, and then I'm going to ask you the question of what are the kinds of objections that you hear the most. But let me ask you this question here before I give you a chance to answer that one, which is, how do we know that what comes after life, as we know it, is not 1,000 times better than what we have? This is a question I've heard. I don't take it very seriously because whatever. But how would you answer that question? Because some people really believe that there is, I mean, and it's not an insignificant portion of the world, right?
No.
There are believers who do believe that sincerely, not because they're dumb or uneducated.
No.
They just believe it. It's it's an act of faith. They do believe that there's something that's much 1,000 times better than this mortal sphere here. How would you respond to that if you really even bother to respond?
Well, I mean, I think high performing people need to have an answer to that question, or they'll be crushed by it, which is sort of part of my point, is just that, we live under the shadow of mortality. It's hard to challenge like an imaginary friend. It's hard to challenge an imaginary immortality because people create such an intimacy with that. And so that's part of the matrix, right? Is this sleep, really, I don't know what else to call it, of, oh, I know where I'm going. I can feel it. Well, you can feel it because you've created a feeling of that in your body. And actually someone told you, someone that you love or care about gave that to you, or whatever. You got it, you acquired it, however you acquired it. But it's very intimate. It's very much inside people, and it's very cozy too. So people feel very close and comforted. And by the way, you don't have to do anything to acquire that imaginary immortality. So you can be very lazy too, because it's like it's just not, but it's not physical, it's not real. So those kind of people probably don't like to hear me talk because it disturbs them,
No,
it
but
disturbs
the thing I want to recognize, sorry, go
but
ahead.
I think we suffer for that. We suffer in our health because we're less physical with ourselves. We're less physical with our bodies. We're less present to other people. We're less present in the world. And so there's a price. I mean, we pay a price. People need it because it's a coping mechanism, but we pay a high price. So I think we can do a lot better. But it takes something. It takes something to emerge from this sleep state into a more physical state of being.
Yeah. Well,
and that's why we need community. I mean, I think that's why Radfest is important, and People Unlimited is important, and the culture of transhumanism is important, because we need to have conversation. Because if you're telling people to let go of their, basically in a way they're gods, they got to have something to connect with that's there. And so I think that's why a new sense of connection and community is really called for.
Yeah. Well, let me just note that you are taking an actual truth stand, in the sense that you're saying these guys are living false consciousness, right? They're delusional and so forth. So you're saying, they're wrong, right? There's false consciousness, right? And you're saying the truth is the other.
There isn't anything.
But wouldn't you say that both of them are an act of faith, that living forever is going to be better than dealing with death they're both acts of faith, wouldn't you say? Like, you can't really prove, because it's just, you can't. I agree totally.
You never really get to forever, right? Like, you'll never cross that line, and you've done it and you're forever. So in a sense, yes, but I think it's a different trajectory. It's a different vector to be on. But I don't, like I say, I mean, it's tricky. This is kind of why it's hard to do. This is kind of why it's hard to bring the human society around, even though we really want to live. It's because we're so intimate with our death. We're so comfortable with it in this weird way. Even though we don't want to live, we don't want to die. This is why there's so much conflict in human beings, because we're basically torn between life and death.
Yeah. No, for me, like I see a response, that I see one valid response to that, right? When somebody says, well, how do you know? I'd say, how do you know? And they would say it's an act of faith. My response would be similarly, it's an act of faith. I believe. I can't prove it. There's no way to prove it. I don't know if we're living 200 years is going to be it's going to cause chaos beyond my imagination, but it's an act of faith. I don't think we can prove it necessarily. I think we can definitely make rational arguments about sustainability and all that.
Yeah.
Those are compelling for sure. But you never know about the complexity. I find myself always in a stronger position when I say, I'm not hiding it. It's an act of faith. I believe that. And just like you have an act of faith, good for you, good for me too, right? Yeah, good for me too. And we end like that, in a sense that nobody is claiming to know better than the other one, which is the thing that sometimes people find jarring, like, well, how do you know, right? And then all of a sudden the conversation goes sideways. Anyway,
it's the future. It's not known.
Not known. Yeah.
The question is what is your relationship to the unknown? I think to me, the unknown holds the future. It holds tremendous promise. But it's the unknown.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think we don't realize enough is that it's amazing how comfortable we are with the unknown. I mean, even you wake up in the morning, the day is unknown to you. You think you're going to go one way or the other, but somehow we're able to manage that, right? So it's sort of a basic skill that we have as human beings to be able to have the kind of intelligence we have the kind of ability to plan in the future, have the kind of memory that we have, and still not be paralyzed by the fact we don't know enough to, I get into my car, I hope for the best. We're always hoping for the best, right? So there is something to saying, yeah, I'm hoping for the best. I'm just hoping for the best in the long term, right?
Yeah, I mean, we live in both, right? We live in knowns and in unknowns. So, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I
So
think
let me ask you that question about how, in your conversations with various folks, what would be the top thing that comes up? Maybe I've asked you, maybe I have not. When somebody says you are nuts to think like that, I'm sure you've bumped into people who dismiss you as lunatic and all that.
yeah. Well,
yeah,
the top thing they say is overpopulation.
overpopulation. Okay.
Which is a really kind of unconscious way of saying there's no room for me. Like there's no room for me to be alive. But we don't really have an overpopulation problem. We have a women's empowerment problem, because when women get empowered with birth control, then populations level out. In fact, in Western countries, populations are like Japan, they have zero population growth. So
yeah. I mean, there are
Western
studies
Europe,
that show that with a better life, if the more money you make, the less children you have, it seems,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And
And
so,
so, yeah,
but
go
with
ahead.
that comes education and empowerment
Education.
of women usually, you
Right,
know.
right.
So,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's the biggest one people say, and it's not.
Which the counter argument on your end is actually pretty powerful, right? Which is, the cause of overpopulation. There's no overpopulation. Or it exists only to the extent that we have not empowered women, right, to take care of and all that. And also the fact that if we had less, let's say, in the countries where you have more poverty in a country, the higher birth, right? Because they need
Yeah,
to
actually, mortality rates
yeah,
and birth rates correlate.
correlate, right? They correlate
Yeah,
exactly. They correlate. So you can say lower the mortality rate, it will lower
yeah,
the problem disappears.
yeah.
Did you get far enough with folks, to engage in that kind of conversation, or they're just like dismissive and they move on?
You know
Generally.
what? It's something deeper in people. It's never like,
Mm,
oh, it's never like an issue. It's something
mm.
deeper in people. And
What
some
do you think
people
that
either,
is? Yeah, go ahead. I want to touch that. That deep.
yeah, some people either want to talk about it and look at it and kind of turn it over a little bit more in their
Mm,
minds, and some people don't. So it's not really like some people say, oh, we can't afford that. Well, the reality is there's a huge longevity dividend. Like if you extend health span by even a year or 2 years, it's worth trillions to the American economy. So
mm.
that's not true. But you could give a person that information and they wouldn't say, oh, okay, you know what? I want to live forever. They have objections because they have a position in their nervous system that that is what they experience. So
Okay, we have like 2 more minutes.
okay.
I want to finish on this note. Like, give me something concrete, like let's say somebody who is showcasing in your conference, maybe a product, right, that is typical or is within the kinds of things that are part of your movement. Just one
Well,
example.
for age reversal, um, you have a lot of good stem cell treatments
Mm,
now. So we had a stem cell panel at RadFest, and it was interesting because they all do it a different way. So they really didn't have agreement, but it was interesting to see them side by side by side. And then you make your decision about what's best for you. But I mean, you can regrow tissue. So there's age reversal on a limited basis. But if you can reverse, let's say you have organ damage, let's say you have a damaged liver, and you can use stem cells like for like stem cells to rejuvenate your liver, that's age reversal. Now, does that give you like escape velocity into immortality? Not necessarily, no, but it gives you it's a limited piece of age reversal. So that's kind of where it is right now, is doing things on a more tactical level. But I think the strategic level is sort of our emotional and intellectual state.
Okay. So where would somebody go to find out more about you?
About me? Well, if you're interested in my writing, you can go to joebardin.com.
Okay.
And if you're interested in the Coalition for Radical Life Extension, you can go to rlecoalition.com and just, connect with the community. It's about people power. In transhumanism, we tend to overemphasize the technology and underemphasize the people. But it's really about people coming together to say, yeah, this is what we want. And that's what we're doing.
Wonderful. Yeah, we will have those links, and then I'll email you so we can get as many of those in the show notes as possible. And then the conference is in 2023, is in early September, right?
Yeah, thank you. It's going to be RadFest is going to be September 7th through the 9th in Anaheim, California. So
wonderful. Yeah, and I went to the website and it's up there. It's and you're taking, are you asking for speakers and sponsors and so forth? And
yeah, that's right. That's right. That's all starting to happen.
Joe Bardin, thank you so much for your time. It was it was even more enjoyable than I thought it would be.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ahmed. I really like talking with you.
Wonderful. Likewise. Thanks a lot.
Bye now.
Take care.
You've been listening to Humanity 8.0 with your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid, founder and CEO of Witlingo. Brought to you by Rokos. Thanks for listening.